You're eating dark chocolate because you've heard it's excellent for the heart, rich in antioxidants, rich in minerals, a guilt-free treat that has somehow moved into the health category. But this is the bit that almost no one discusses. Darker chocolate is more likely to contain heavy metals, lead, cadmium, substances that do not simply move through your body, but build gradually over time. What's the most upsetting part? The brands that people trust the most, organic, ethical, premium dark chocolate, are frequently the worst offenders. Multiple independent tests revealed that dark chocolate bars offered in British shops exceeded health-based heavy metal safety guidelines, some by a lot, not in obscure imports. Mainstream brands are available on shelves at Tesco, Waitrose and Sainsbury's. These are the identical bars that are advertised for heart health, sold at high costs and advised by wellness gurus. In other nations, these findings prompted litigation, reformulated products and public warnings. In the UK, silence. There are no testing disclosures, no labels, no responsibility. So, in this study, we are ripping back the veil. We'll explain which UK chocolate brands to avoid, why the problem is worse in dark chocolate, and how marketing has diverted customers' attention away from a serious contamination problem. And yes, there are safer options. However, most people have never heard of them. Dark chocolate did not become a health food by mistake. Cocoa got this reputation because it naturally includes flavonols, which have been linked to enhanced blood flow, heart health, and inflammation reduction. The problem is that flavonols and heavy metals originate in the same place. Cocoa beans absorb minerals straight from the soil in which they grow. Cadmium can be found in volcanic or mineral-rich soils. Lead contamination can also develop during the drying and processing stages, when beans are exposed to dust and pollutants. As chocolate darkens, the cocoa content rises. Flavonols rise, but so does the concentration of whatever else is in the chocolate. Marketing simplified the message. A higher percentage indicates better health. Organic means cleaner. Ethical equals better. However, biology does not care about branding. Organic certification does not eliminate geological cadmium. Ethical sourcing does not eliminate post-harvest contamination. Premium pricing does not guarantee safety. Dark chocolate can be included in a healthy diet, but only when the advantages outweigh the risks, and only when brands are honest enough. That's where most of them fail. This rating is not based on taste, popularity, or branding. It is based on risk. Each chocolate brand was rated based on 4 key parameters. First, do independent testing. When lab data exists, it is more important than any marketing claim. Ones having confirmed outcomes were graded substantially differently than ones without them. Second, consider source areas. Chocolate farmed in South America, particularly volcanic regions such as Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, has a considerably higher risk of cadmium pollution than chocolate grown in older West African soils. The third principle is transparency. Companies that post testing data, explain sourcing decisions, and recognize contamination risks were evaluated substantially differently than companies that did not say anything. Fourth, consider the risks and benefits. High flavanol content does not justify excessive heavy metal exposure. Balance is important. This list is not about panic. It's about likelihood. When brands refuse to test, publish results, or hide behind certifications that do not address contamination, customers are left speculating. And when dealing with cumulative exposure over time, guessing isn't adequate. This is the chocolate that many people believe is the safest. Organic, fair trade, premium prices, frequently seen in health food aisles and upscale supermarkets. It is marketed as ethical, clean, and beneficial for you. However, independent testing shows a totally different picture. This brand was discovered to contain lead and cadmium at levels that exceeded health-based safety limits. Not just marginally, significantly. In several situations, both metals were raised inside the same bar. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Organic certification does little to lessen heavy metal levels in chocolate. Cadmium comes from the earth. No pesticides does not imply no pollution. Organic cocoa, in fact, can concentrate heavy metals more efficiently since plants do not compete for mineral intake with synthetic fertilizers. Consumers are paying more, sometimes significantly more, for chocolate that poses a larger risk of contamination than cheaper alternatives. That's not only disappointing, it is deceiving. When a product is marketed as promoting well-being, ethics, and purity, the bar of proof should be increased. Instead, consumers are forced to pay high costs for a product that fails on the most fundamental level: safety. This is where trust starts to erode. This brand is based on precision, workmanship, and elegance. Swiss heritage, expertly constructed, the finest ingredients. The message is consistent and compelling. However, when tested, The findings did not match the image. An independent examination discovered cadmium and lead levels that exceeded health-based guidelines in some of this brand's dark chocolate bars. Some of the higher cocoa varieties fared much worse. When challenged legally in other markets, the company's response was telling. Their lawyers contended that terms like expertly crafted were simply marketing rhetoric, not guarantees of quality or safety. In other words, the words on the wrapper were not intended to mean anything. That is important, because buyers frequently perceive premium language as reassuring. The higher price feels like protection. It is not. This brand continues to sell the same dark chocolate in the UK, with no warnings, published test results, or public acknowledgement of the problem. Luxury does not cancel away infection. And when brands rely on reputation rather than transparency, consumers bear the risk. This company developed its reputation by doing the right thing. Ethical sourcing, transparent supply chains, public commitments to fair labour and better farming conditions. Many individuals trust this brand since its principles seem to match their own. And to be clear, those initiatives are important. However, ethical behaviour may not always imply safety. Testing indicated that this brand's dark chocolate has increased amounts of lead. Not disastrous, but above what health-based guidelines would deem acceptable, particularly for a food that people consume on a regular basis. The corporation acknowledges that cocoa contains heavy metals. However, unlike their labour reporting, they do not publish detailed test results. Consumers are asked to trust without evidence. Here is the issue. Lead pollution is frequently prevented. Covered drying platforms and proper post-harvest management can significantly limit exposure. Transparency in one area does not justify silence in another. This brand is hardly the worst offender. However, it reflects an increasing trend. Chocolate firms decide which truths to convey and which to discreetly ignore. For a product portrayed as ethical, selective openness is important. This is one of Britain's most well-known chocolate bars, a name that has endured for generations. Affordable, nostalgic, trusted. However, there is a safety issue. There is no independent heavy metal testing data available for this chocolate. There are none publicly available. There are no disclosures. There's no transparency. What is known as the source. The parent company's cocoa supply chains are similar to those of other brands that have previously tested poorly. That does not establish contamination, but it raises concerns. There's also the formula itself. Despite being promoted as dark chocolate, the cocoa percentage is quite low. By health standards, it is barely dark. So, what do consumers get? Low flavanol benefits, uncertain heavy metal exposure, and no accountability. This is not the worst chocolate on the list, but it represents something equally troubling: utter ambiguity. When brands do not test and disclose, consumers are forced to bear the risk, and in a category involving cumulative exposure, ambiguity is not a neutral position. This is one of the most well-known chocolate bars in Britain. It has been there for generations, representing nostalgia, affordability, and trust. Many households feel safe because it is familiar. But when it comes to heavy metal, familiarity does not imply reassurance. There is no independent testing data available for this chocolate, no lead numbers, there are no cadmium figures, no transparency at all. That doesn't indicate it's tainted, but it does leave consumers in the dark. What is known is that the parent firm sources cocoa from the same places as other brands that have previously performed poorly. That raises legitimate concerns, especially when no laboratory data are provided to dispute it. There is another difficulty. Despite being promoted as dark chocolate, the cocoa level is quite low. That means fewer flavanol advantages while bearing the same level of contamination risk in the supply chain. So the trade-off isn't even beneficial. This brand does not rank lowest due to confirmed danger. It ranks here due of uncertainty. And when exposure accumulates gradually over time, being unknown is not a pleasant situation. This brand appeals to customers for one simple reason: affordability. It's a low-cost dark chocolate that appears quality enough to feel like a wise compromise. The issue is what you don't know. There are no independent testing results available for this chocolate. There is no sourcing transparency, no heavy metal disclosures. Consumers are expected to trust that a low price does not imply low standards. But there is a red flag in the background. Some varieties under this name are sourced from places known for high geological cadmium levels, particularly in South America. These soils naturally concentrate heavy metals in cocoa beans. And cadmium limitations are greater in Europe than in other countries with stricter health rules. This means that a product can be supplied lawfully while still causing significant long-term exposure. Without test data, this is a gamble. The flavanol content may be reasonable. The pollution may be moderate. Or not. At the very least, the price indicates uncertainty. You are not paying a premium for the unknown danger. Nonetheless, it serves as a reminder that affordability does not cancel out biology. This chocolate is in the finest, or taste the difference section of a big UK supermarket. It's positioned as high quality without the luxury price tag, with the intention of making it feel like a wise upgrade. However, premium placement does not necessarily imply premium transparency. There are no documented heavy metal testing results for this chocolate. None. Despite being sold by one of the UK's major merchants, which has the resources to test each batch, consumers receive no information. What stands out is the sourcing from South American locations known for volcanic soils. These places routinely have higher amounts of cadmium in cocoa. That does not inherently render the chocolate dangerous, but it does significantly raise the likelihood of contamination. The problem isn't that this chocolate has been proven hazardous. The retailer chooses silence. When a firm has the ability to test, disclose, and reassure, but does not, it is a decision. Consumers are asked to trust brands above data. Until testing is published, this chocolate is a moderate to high worry, regardless of how sophisticated the package appears. This brand uses a very similar recipe: premium supermarket positioning, a somewhat greater cocoa percentage, language that conveys craftsmanship and quality. However, there is no evidence to support this claim. There are no independent testing results. There is no sourcing breakdown. No heavy metal disclosures. Just reassurance via branding. The increased cocoa content is sometimes advertised as a benefit, although this applies both ways. As cocoa content increases, so does flavanol concentration, as does the concentration of anything else in chocolate, including heavy metals. Without testing, consumers cannot determine whether the advantages outweigh the hazards. This is where chocolate marketing gets extremely confusing. More cocoa sounds healthier, but without safety data, it could simply mean increased exposure. This brand is not ranked higher because it has been proven dangerous. It is listed here because it expects people to presume safety without proof, which is not a healthy practice. Until honesty replaces marketing, this chocolate is best avoided for frequent intake. This brand positions itself as British luxury, estate ownership, craftsmanship from the bean to the bar, a tale that implies total control over quality from farm to finished chocolate. In principle, this should be the gold standard. Estate ownership can result in improved post-harvest management, cleaner drying methods, and lower contamination risks. Vertical integration has the potential to solve a number of industry-wide issues. But speculation is not evidence. There is no independent testing data available for this brand's dark chocolate. No lead numbers. There are no cadmium results, only premium pricing and implicit trust. That is the source of my frustration. If any brand has the resources to test and publicize findings, this is it. However, consumers are still expected to take safety on faith. Luxury without proof is only pricey ambiguity. This brand is ranked higher on the list because it has potential. However, until that potential is supported by transparent evidence, it remains unverified and unearned. Here's where the pattern eventually breaks. This brand openly discusses heavy metals. They release testing results. They explain the sourcing decisions. They acknowledge the problem rather than avoid it. Independent testing revealed that their dark chocolate had substantially lower amounts of lead and cadmium than most competitors, while still providing a high flavanol content. Balance is important. This brand demonstrates that safety and quality are not mutually exclusive. Companies are eager to do the task, so you don't have to choose between health benefits and contamination danger. They source wisely, test frequently, and communicate effectively. Most importantly, they don't demand exorbitant rates for doing so. This is how ethical chocolate production looks. Transparency isn't considered a marketing risk. It is considered as a responsibility. This brand ranks at the top because it values customers enough to tell them the truth. And in an industry based on silence, that alone distinguishes it. This is the benchmark. This is the only commercially available UK dark chocolate that has been independently certified to be significantly lower in lead and cadmium than rigorous health-based guidelines. The difference begins at the source. Cocoa is grown in older, non-volcanic soils with naturally low cadmium levels. Farmer ownership promotes quality control rather than cost minimization. But the true distinction is proof. Independent testing reveals minimal contamination. Not an estimate. Not making assumptions. Measured outcomes. This means that daily intake does not gradually increase your exposure to heavy metals over time. You get the benefits of dark chocolate, flavanols, delight, and fulfillment without the long-term drawback. It demonstrates something vital. The problem isn't with cocoa. It's not dark chocolate. It's how most businesses prefer to operate. This company demonstrates that safe, ethical, and truly healthy chocolate is possible when transparency is prioritized over marketing. Availability is not always consistent, but when it is worthwhile to stock up. Because this is what better chocolate really looks like. Once you know what to look for, poor chocolate is easy to identify. First, be wary of unclear assertions. Words like organic, artisan, or expertly crafted are meaningless without data. None of them discuss heavy metals. The second step is to source questions. Chocolate from volcanic locations has a higher cadmium risk. If a brand refuses to say where its cocoa originates from, presume they don't want you to know. Third, search for testing transparency. Tested brands will tell you. Brands that don't won't. Fourth, do not assume that price equals safety. Some of the most costly chocolates perform poorly. Finally, remember this. Health is not about labels. It's about evidence. If a corporation cannot demonstrate that its product is safe, you are being asked to accept the risk. And cumulative exposure is a risk you do not need to take. Let us know what you think down below in the comments.